with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The rulers sneered at Jesus and said, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the chosen one, the Christ of God." Even the soldiers jeered at him. As they approached to offer him wine, they called out, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." Above him there was an inscription that read, "This is the King of the Jews." Now one of the criminals hanging there reviled Jesus, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." The other, however, rebuking him, said in reply, "Have you no fear of God? For you are subject to the same condemnation, and indeed we have been condemned justly, for the sentence we received corresponds to our crimes. But this man has done nothing criminal." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he replied to him, "Amen, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever been set for failure? Somebody who perhaps you loved, or a friend, or a co-worker, somebody in your family that put everything together so that you would fail. One of those no-win situations that under any circumstance there will be failure. If you have ever experienced this, you know in your heart how much something like that hurts. In the first reading of today, we hear about the story of David, when David is coronated, anointed actually, as a king of Israel. And so he is being brought to Hebron to become the king of all the Jewish people. This was about 1,000 years before Christ. Now, this is the moment of glory. That's the moment of, let's say, his ordination. So it's a big celebration. But for David to get to that point, he had to go through so much, including betrayal. We know how the story of David started. The king was actually Saul. Saul was the king, and Saul had one issue, is that there was another army coming to get the Israelites, the Philistines. And he didn't know what to do because it was a no-win situation. Israel was going to lose the battle. Until this youth, this young guy from son of Jesse from Bethlehem of Judea, comes with no horse, no chariot, no weapon, except what he normally used to tend the sheep, his slingshot. This is a slingshot. I don't have the stone, I don't have anything, but this is part of the Bible Museum. So David comes, and he does what he knows to do. And suddenly, boom, he killed the giant, Goliath. We heard that story, right? Right in between the eyes. Now, there is one issue with this. It brought victory to Israel, but it brought jealousy in the heart of Saul. And Saul became perturbed more and more each time because David, because of his triumph, because of the way that he had turned things around, became more popular. And you know how that goes with jealousy. So Saul kept setting David to failure. Every time Saul had an opportunity to put David at the front of the battle so that he would be killed by the enemies, he did. But every time, Saul was able to turn things around. Amazing. He had many opportunities to kill David, and David always came free. In the first book of Samuel, we see that even Saul was brought to the hands of David, and David could have revenge because the king was trying to kill him, but he didn't. And David turned things around also for the life of Saul. And that's how he forgave him and spared his life, not once, but several times. Finally, Saul died. And then David became the king of the Jews. Things turned around. Why? Because he was able to reconcile. Now, David, far from perfect, we know that he eventually sinned as well. But at this point, he becomes king after turning things around by the power of reconciliation. 1,000 years forward, 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ came to us. He was also set up for failure. Today we hear in this reading of the Christ the King solemnity, we hear the spectacle that Jesus is brought to Golgotha, to Calvary, and that he is crucified amidst two criminals. That's no coincidence. That's a setup. They were setting up for failure, because that way Jesus would be one criminal among many. In fact, everyone was laughing at him. We heard it in the day. And not only that, they even put a sign on top of him saying that he is the King of the Jews. Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum. That wasn't a title. It was mockery. They were making fun of him. They wanted him to die like a criminal and to die as a criminal. But at that very moment of the cross, Jesus turned things around and hit the devil in between the eyes with the power of reconciliation. Today, you will be with me in paradise. It's incredible. That's the power of reconciliation. Jesus reveals his kingship through that power. The moment when he was set up for failure, he turned things around and hit the devil in between the eyes with the power of reconciliation. Yesterday was November 23rd. On November 23rd of 1927, a priest was executed. His name was Father Miguel Pro, now a blessed of the church, and he will be declared a saint eventually. He was a Jesuit priest. This priest died during a conflict that was called the Cristero movement in Mexico. He was a very brave priest. Actually, public worship was forbidden in Mexico. You couldn't have churches open. You couldn't celebrate Mass. Everything had to be done in secret for everybody in the entire nation. Well, Father Pro did something awesome. He would disguise himself as all kinds of trades, from a miner to a gardener to a teacher to a lawyer. He would have a series of costumes in his closet so that he would not be caught walking through the streets. And then he would go to people's homes to celebrate Mass because he wanted to make sure that his flock would receive the body and blood of Christ, all in secret for several years, until he got caught. There was a plot against him and against his brothers to be killed. They set him up for failure. And indeed, he was killed for that. Eventually, we learned that he didn't do anything wrong, that the devil had set up the plot for him to be killed. I have written about him in the bulletin before. He comes in a suit, opening his arms, and he is, I understand, the first martyr of the church of whom we actually have a picture of the moment of his execution, before and after he was shot. And he died, but right before he was shot, he screamed to the top of his lungs, "Viva Cristo Rey! Long live Christ the King!" And then he got shot. I visited his shrine in February this year. But how God turns things around. Even though he was set up for failure, God once again was able to hit the devil right in between the eyes with the power of reconciliation. He died forgiving his executioners. There were about 20,000 people the day of his funeral. And after that, we're talking about 1927, he was only 36 years old. The faith exploded in Mexico. And Mexico became one of the most faithful Catholic countries in the world, even to this day, because blood of martyrs, seed of Christians. That's how the power of Christ the King turned things around, even when you are set up for failure, by the power of reconciliation. So, if there is anything in our hearts that needs to be reconciled, something that needs to be forgiven, even betrayal, even those experiences in which other people have set us for failure, well, as you claim Christ as your King, Christ is inviting you to hit the devil in between the eyes with the power of reconciliation. Christ is the one who has come to reconcile all things to himself. We heard in the second reading. He can reconcile things in your life too. Long life, long live Christ the King. Viva Cristo Rey.